So what do I mean when I talk about it's a big deal? When people are poisoned with pharmakia. What does that mean for you, and what does that mean for the times that we're in? Well, those of you that have been listening to what I write, what I talk about in these recordings, will see a thread of a concept called meta-war. You will see a concept known as the metasphere, or spiritual reality, that transcends everything around us. The reality that you live in is much deeper than what your five senses and brain can perceive. You're in a bigger reality, whether you realize that or not. And there's certain things throughout all of history that have sought to keep humanity poisoned, enslaved, controllable, and in lies. And one of the biggest ways they do that is through luring people into the misappropriation, the misapplication, and the misuse of knowledge, of information. And the use of pharmakia, meaning to drug or poison, has been one of their major tactics throughout all of history. It has been one of the major tools by which the kingdoms, the empires, right, have ruled or been ruled through by these various powers and principalities that are inherently hostile to humanity. So when you see these cycles, these patterns throughout all of history, there are threads that when you pull them and you start investigating, you start looking deeper, you will find that the story that you've been told in so many ways unravels. And a new story that you may have bits and pieces of, an idea of, concepts of, an inkling of, begins to make more sense. You see, there's a lot more depth in worldviews than people realize. There's a lot more depth in history than people are willing to investigate. Throughout all of human history, there is the metasphere that overarches and affects everything here. Secularists deny this because they deny any kind of spiritual reality in many cases, or just lump it all in with the concepts of religion. But even the words we use have been polluted and poisoned. So when I use a word like religion, it immediately conjures up in people's minds all kinds of images, experiences, ideas, and concepts that they've encountered in their own lives. Your enemies count on that, which is why it is they want to pollute your thinking, get you to redefine things or deny words, get rid of words, or change the meanings of those words and get you to use them wrongly. Your enemies are like malicious code in your mind and body, functioning to distort your perceptions of reality, of others, of yourself, of what you're living in, and all of human history. Now, why would they do that? In Christendom, we talk about the father of lies being the serpent, the Nakash, the glistening one, the most cunning and clever of all the beasts of the field. How do you think the beast, the dragon, the serpent, has been able to rule over humanity for so long? And some of you are going, well, I don't even believe in that. Okay. Then why don't you ask yourself why humanity and the history of humanity has been filled with wreckage for so long? Now that's where everybody's projections get very intense indeed. That's where people don't want to talk about certain things. They want to self-edit themselves, censor themselves, for fear of what others might think, or they're just hostile outright to other people's perspectives. That's all due to malicious code injected into the OS of humanity and individuals that make up humanity. And one of the big ways that occurs is through pharmakia, drugging and poisoning people. Drugging and poisoning not only their bodies and minds, but also their sources of information, and even means and methods of obtaining and applying that information. Yet humanity continues on this great wheel, going around and around like a millstone. Repeating the same things over and over again, with each generation thinking that they are terminally unique, never having learned the lessons of the ones before them, or taking the past, the history of those that came before them, and misappropriating, misapplying, misusing, having been misled. Again, another example of what I mean by malicious code injected into the OS of humanity. I'm not just using that metaphorically, although it certainly works as a metaphor. I mean, after all, we have used the word corruption interchangeably in terms of morals and ethics, but also in terms of data, do we not? In terms of your networks and your databases being corrupted. So why is it such a problem for so many people when followers of Jesus, Christians, talk about the corruptibility of humanity, the corruptibility of the human condition, and of the flesh? Is it not clear that everything that we build is subject to the second law of thermodynamics, the second law of thermodynamics, and entropy? Why do you think that these mortal coils die? Why do you think that we hate death so much? We fear it. Because so many believe that that is the finality. There is nothing more than what they see. Yet they yearn for something that is greater than the temporal, the finite. Even atheists, even people that have no belief in the spiritual realm or any kind of idea of eternity, yearn for eternal life. Why do you think that is? You see, it's built into all of us. That question, the horror, the disgust, the frustration, the sadness, the fear of death, of this being all there is. Yet what do I tell you fear is? False evidence appearing real. So if I tell you that your enemy in the spiritual, in the metasphere, has a vested interest in you believing that there is nothing after this, and that this is all there is, because it is securing to itself slaves, securing to itself a food source to keep itself alive by lying to you and making slaves out of you. You have a hard time with that, don't you? Yet you can see examples of that in this present age and throughout all of human history. No one wants to be a slave. Much less a slave to malicious code. You don't want your devices, your networks, your computer systems to be held hostage by cyber attacks. Why is it so difficult for you to believe that that points you actually to something much greater, and that is the malicious code at work in your own minds and bodies, holding you hostage with corruption and lies? Is that so difficult to actually comprehend? And if it is, or it's frustrating to you, ask yourself this: why do you think that is? Because what I'm going to tell you now is that what's getting you agitated or making you want to push back on what I'm saying is the malicious code. It is what's destroying you, what's lying to you, what's enslaving you, and what is devouring you. That's why so often I say, it's the truth that will set you free. That's what we have said for 2,000 years in Christendom. And you often hear me say, or you see me write, it's the truth in love that brings about justice, authentic justice, and mercy from humble and contrite hearts. You see, the father of lies, the Nakash, wants you to remain in the lie because you're a slave to that corruption, the malicious code, what Christians call sin. And it devours you. It's leading you to your destruction, like an addiction. But here's the irony. The ultimate addiction is the addiction of your enemy to you. That's the great lie. That's the big lie. That's the big deal. Because your enemy needs you to survive, not the other way around. But because of pride, your enemy uses malicious code to take, to enslave, in order to deceive, devour, and destroy you. Having convinced you, you need what it gets you addicted to, itself. That's why pharmakeia is a big deal. Because that is how the dark powers work, to control you, to enslave you, to poison your minds and your bodies, your societies. It is what we would call in Christendom, right, a sowing of the wind. Then it blames you for what it got you to do and led you into a trap into, when it's actually the one to blame. That's why knowing who you are and what you are, and knowing that it is bigger than your mortal coils, your flesh, the covers of your book, is so important. God made you for so much more than just the cover. The cover of the book in this case being your flesh, your five senses and your brain apart from the Spirit of truth. There's a reason we say that nothing good dwells in the flesh, in those mortal coils. What do you think it is that dwells there? The very thing that is ultimately killing you, that causes entropy, and that is the malicious code of the serpent seed, of the Nakash. It is them feeding upon you. Now think about that. Do you not have parasites in this world? Why would you think that there would not be spiritual ones? Do you not have enslavers, slave traders in this world? Drug dealers that want to get you hooked, right? Why would you think that you wouldn't have the equivalent of that happening in the spiritual? What do you think is running those folks and using them as proxies? You see, they're just proxies and slaves to the very thing that they're being used to try to destroy you with, enslave you with. They're no different than you in many cases. So think about this in terms of what I told you about Pergamum. What did they make? Parchments, scrolls. And what was the parchment made from? Skins, of course, animal skins. So consider that in terms of you being used by the hostile spiritual powers, and why it is they want your flesh, your skins, and control over you so much. And what else was in what else was in Pergamum? Right? Great library, right? Toxicology, pharmacology, medical sciences, right? Toxicology being the study of poisons, right? Epidemiology, the study of illnesses, right? What we would call that today, right? That's what we would call it today. How very interesting, huh? A library always has books. A scroll is a book. Have you ever used the term, don't judge a book by the cover, in response to or in use pointed towards another person? Don't judge me, right? By the outer cover, by the book cover, outward appearances. Everybody is a book. The book cover is just your skin. The question is, what kind of story are you writing, and in what spirit? Is it work, writing it for you or with you? Against you or for you? We're all books. We're all a collection of books that make up a greater book called the History of Humanity. All of history is a library of books, just like the Bible is a book of books. And yet again, in the book of Revelation, you hear of another book called the Lamb's Book of Life. It is a book of books. The Lamb's Book of Life is found the names, the people, the stories, right? The books of those who love the truth, who sought the truth, who are seekers of life and truth and love and justice and mercy from humble and contrite hearts. We even use the terminology that Jesus is the author and finisher of our faith. Here again, you have language that ties all the way back to the very beginning and deals with authorship. Do you want your life to be a work of fiction, or do you want it to be authentic and real? You see, these are questions you need to be asking yourselves right now. In the end, there are but two kinds of books. Those that have something written on the pages there within, authored by life itself, or those who are works of fiction, whose pages are empty of life and are not fit reading. Now, think about that. Do you want to read a book that's filled with nothing but confusion and lies? Yet the author is telling you it's true? The author's mocking you. That's the father of lies, the author of confusion. God is not the author of confusion, nor of fear. He is the Father of lights. Think about these things. I'll continue these talks, and we'll dive a little more into Pergamum and the history of Pharmakia and its impacts on the empires and kingdoms of this world, and how it is impacting all of us today, and why it is such a big deal that you understand this as we enter into the final reckoning of it. And I want you to always remember, as it is for people, so too it is for nations.